The billionaire mafia boss followed his cleaner in secret, and what he saw destroyed his heartblood. On marble floors, a woman scrubbing in silence. Behind the luxury of Lagos's most powerful crime lord lies a secret so devastating it could shatter everything. Obinna Okafor owns half the city. Politicians, judges, entire neighborhoods bow to his name, but tonight he'll follow the woman who cleans his penthouse into the darkness of Ajagunle slums. What he discovers there won't just break his heart, it will expose the cruelest truth about the empire he built. She's been hiding something, and when he finally sees it, there's no going back. The Lagos skyline glittered like broken glass against the midnight sky, each light a reminder of Obinna Okafor's reach. From his penthouse office in Victoria Island, he controlled more than territory. He controlled fate. At 42, his name alone could silence a room or start a war. But tonight, something else held his attention. Adaize. She moved. Through his penthouse like a ghost, her cleaning uniform hanging loose on her thin frame. For 6 months, she'd arrived at exactly 10 p.m., worked until dawn, and disappeared before sunrise. She never spoke unless spoken to, never asked questions, never looked him in the eye. Most people feared Obinna, but Adaize seemed to carry a different kind of fear, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than his reputation. "You work too hard," Obinna said, watching her scrub blood from the marble floor. There'd been a disagreement earlier. Business. Adaize's hands didn't stop moving. "It's my job, sir. I pay you enough to hire help. I manage, sir." Before continuing, "I need you to understand something about stories like this. They're built on real human struggles, the kind that exist in every corner of Lagos. If this story resonates with you, if you want to see where Adaize's secret leads, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about power and sacrifice." Obinna studied her, mid-30s he guessed, beautiful in a way that poverty tried to hide, high cheekbones, full lips, eyes that held storms. She wore no jewelry, no makeup. Her hands were rough, scarred from harsh chemicals and hard work. "Where do you go?" he asked suddenly. "After here." Her hands paused for just a second. "Home, sir." "Where's home?" "Ajagunle, sir." Ajagunle, the slums. A place where even Obinna's men moved carefully, where poverty bred both desperation and unexpected strength. It was the kind of neighborhood where people disappeared and no one asked questions. "That's far," Obinna observed. 2 hours by Danfo at least." "I'm used to it, sir." Something in her voice, resigned, exhausted, but determined, struck him oddly. Obinna had built his empire on reading people, on seeing their weaknesses and exploiting them. But Adaize was different. She had no vanity to flatter, no greed to tempt, no visible pressure points. That night, after she left at 5 a.m., Obinna made a decision that would change everything. He would follow her. It was irrational. He had hundreds of men for surveillance, for gathering information, but something about Adaize demanded his personal attention. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way she cleaned blood without flinching as if she'd seen worse. Maybe it was simply that she was the only person in Lagos who didn't want anything from him. The next evening, Obinna prepared carefully. No flashy suits, no jewelry that screamed wealth. Just dark jeans, a simple shirt, a baseball cap. He looked almost normal, almost like someone who could blend into the chaos of Lagos streets. When Adaize left his penthouse at 5:03 a.m., Obinna was already in an unmarked car 3 blocks away. He watched her walk to the bus stop, shoulders hunched against the early morning chill. She didn't take a taxi, didn't call for a ride. She waited with the market women and night shift workers, just another invisible person. In the city's endless flow, the Danfo bus was packed, people hanging from the doors. Adaize squeezed inside, and Obinna followed at a careful distance in his car, through the pre-dawn traffic, past the high-rises of Victoria Island, across the third mainland bridge where the lagoon stretched dark and vast below, into the increasingly crowded streets of the mainland. The neighborhoods changed. Glass towers gave way to concrete blocks, then to tin roofs and unpaved roads. The air grew thicker, heavy with smoke from early morning fires, the smell of poverty that no amount of money could completely escape. Ajagunle emerged from the darkness like a different world, narrow streets choked with garbage, buildings leaning against each other like exhausted fighters, open sewers running alongside crumbling sidewalks. Music blared from somewhere, mixing with shouts, laughter, crying babies. life compressed into every available space, people fighting for existence in every breath. Adaze got off the bus and walked deeper into the maze. Obinna parked his car. It would be stripped within an hour here, but he didn't care, and followed on foot. She moved with purpose through streets that would have confused anyone else, taking turns that seemed random but clearly weren't. Past the mechanics' workshops starting to open, past the women setting up food stalls, past the young men eyeing him with calculation. Finally, Adaze stopped at a building that looked ready to collapse. Rust stained the walls. The stairwell was dark, reeking of urine and decay. She climbed to the third floor and Obinna waited in the shadows below. Then he heard it. A child's cough. Not just any cough, the deep, rattling kind that spoke of serious illness. The kind that Obinna recognized from his own childhood in these same streets before he'd clawed his way to power. He moved closer, finding a broken window that looked into the apartment. What he saw made his blood run cold. The apartment was smaller than Obinna's closet. One room serving as bedroom, kitchen and living space. Cardboard-covered broken windows. A single bulb hung from a wire, casting sickly yellow light. But it wasn't the poverty that stopped Obinna's heart. He'd grown up in worse. It was the child. A boy, maybe 7 years old, lay on a thin mattress on the floor. His breathing was labored, each exhale rattling in his chest. His skin held a grey pallor that Obinna recognized instantly. Serious illness, probably untreated for too long. Adaze knelt beside him, her exhaustion forgotten. "Mama's home, Chibuzo," she whispered, pressing her hand to his forehead. Her face crumpled for just a moment before she forced it smooth again. "I'm here now." The boy's eyes opened slightly. "Hurts, Mama." "I know, baby, I know." She pulled out a bottle of medicine. Generic paracetamol, the kind that cost almost nothing because it barely worked. "Take this. It'll help." From his hiding place, Obinna watched her help the boy swallow the pills. Then she stood, moving to a small camping stove in the corner. She lit it with a match, the flame sputtering weakly. A pot of water, some Gary. She was making the cheapest meal possible, the kind you ate when you had no other choice. Have you wondered what drives someone to scrub blood off marble floors at midnight? The question hung in Obinna's mind as he watched her move with practiced efficiency despite her exhaustion. Drop a comment below. What would you sacrifice for someone you love? Because Adaze's sacrifice is just beginning to reveal itself. While the food cooked, Adaze pulled out a small notebook from under the mattress. Even from the window, Obinna could see it was filled with numbers, calculations, desperate mathematics. She stared at the pages, and a single tear rolled down her cheek before she wiped it away angrily. Another woman entered the apartment without knocking, elderly, wearing a faded wrapper. "Adaze, you're back." "Mama Ngozi." Adaze stood quickly, composing herself. "Thank you for watching him. The boy needs a hospital," Mama Ngozi said bluntly. She was the kind of woman who'd survived too much to soften hard truths. "That cough is getting worse." "I know." Adaze's voice cracked. "I'm trying. I have almost enough for the consultation fee. Next week, maybe." "Next week might be too late." "I know." The words exploded from Adaze, sharp with desperation and fear. Then softer. "I know. I'm doing everything I can." Mama Ngozi touched her shoulder. "I'm not judging you, child. We all see how hard you work. But that boy needs more than hard work can buy." After Mama Ngozi left, Adaze returned to Chibuzo. She fed him small spoonfuls of Gary, encouraging him with gentle words even as he struggled to swallow. She sang to him, a Igbo lullaby that reminded Obinna of his own mother, dead 20 years now. Obinna's phone buzzed. A message from Emeka, his second-in-command. "Problem with the port shipment. Need you now." He ignored it. For the first time in years, business could wait. As dawn broke properly over Ajegunle, Adaze finally allowed herself to rest. She lay down beside Chibuzo on that thin mattress, fully clothed, her arm around him protectively. But she didn't sleep. She just stared at the ceiling, her lips moving in silent prayer. Obinna understood then what he'd seen in her eyes all these months. It wasn't just fear or exhaustion. It was the look of someone fighting a war they couldn't win, someone watching, something precious slip away despite everything they did to hold on. He pulled back from the window, his mind racing. He'd followed her expecting... what? An affair? A secret family? Some kind of betrayal or deception? Instead, he'd found a mother working herself to death to save her dying son. A woman who cleaned blood from his floors, to buy medicine that wasn't enough, a person who carried a weight that would have crushed most people, yet still showed up every night to do her job with quiet dignity. His phone buzzed again. 3 more messages. A shipment worth millions, business that demanded his attention, the empire that he'd built brick by bloody brick. Obina looked back at the window one more time. Adais had finally fallen asleep, but even in sleep, her face held tension. Her hand rested on Chibuzo's chest, as if making sure he was still breathing. Something shifted in Obina's chest, an unfamiliar sensation, uncomfortable and insistent. He'd spent 20 years building walls around himself, becoming the kind of man who could make impossible decisions without flinching. He'd ordered deaths, destroyed lives, crushed anyone who stood in his way. But this woman, this cleaner who asked for nothing, who expected nothing, who simply endured, she'd done what no enemy ever could. She'd made him feel something. As Obina walked back through the maze of Ajagunle's streets to where he'd left his car, miraculously still there, probably because even thieves respected the air of danger he carried, he made a decision. He would help her, but not openly. Adais had pride. He'd seen it in every careful word, every lowered eye. If he simply offered money, she'd refuse, maybe even quit. No, this required delicacy, strategy, the same skills he used to navigate Lagos's criminal underworld. By the time he reached his penthouse, the sun was fully up. The city had transformed from mysterious darkness to brutal daylight. Emeka was waiting, agitated. "Boss, where were you?" "The port." "Situation." "Handle it," Obina interrupted. "I have something more important to deal with." Emeka's eyes widened. In 15 years of working together, nothing had been more important than business. Obina picked up his phone and made a call to Dr. Okonkwo, Lagos's premier pediatric specialist, and someone who owed him several significant favors. "I need a house call," Obina said. "Ajagunle, bring everything you might need for a serious respiratory illness in a child. And doctor? Discretion is essential." "Of course, Mr. Okafor. When?" "Today." After hanging up, Obina stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city he controlled. Somewhere out there, Adaizi was probably waking up, checking on her son, calculating how many more nights of cleaning she'd need before she could afford proper medicine. She had no idea that the man whose blood she cleaned had just seen her secret, or that he was about to change everything. Dr. Okonkwo's house call to Ajagunle caused exactly the kind of discreet chaos Obina had anticipated. The doctor arrived in an unmarked car with a nurse, carrying enough equipment to run a mobile clinic. Mama Ngozi had been easy to convince. A phone call, a substantial cash payment, and instructions to get Adaizi and Chibuzo to be home at 2 p.m. for a free community health screening. Obina watched from a distance, parked 3 streets away, but connected via Emeka's drone, a small surveillance device that looked like a bird. Technology had its uses even in slums where electricity was unpredictable. Through Emeka's tablet, he saw Adaizi's confusion when Dr. Okonkwo entered her apartment, saw her instinctive distrust, her body positioning herself between the strangers and her son, saw Mama Ngozi's gentle insistence that this was legitimate, that people sometimes did good things in bad places. The examination took 40 minutes. Obina watched Adaizi's face cycle through emotions. Fear, hope, desperation, suspicion. She asked questions in rapid Igbo, which Dr. Okonkwo answered patiently. Finally, after thorough tests, the doctor spoke the words that made Adaizi's knees buckle. "Your son has severe pneumonia complicated by malnutrition and possibly tuberculosis. He needs immediate hospitalization, probably 2 weeks of intensive care, medication, proper nutrition. Without treatment," he left the rest unsaid. "How much?" Adaizi's voice was barely a whisper. "For this screening, nothing. It's part of our community outreach." "No." Adaizi shook her head firmly. "The treatment, the hospital, how much will it cost?" Dr. Okonkwo named a figure that might as well have been $1 million. Obina saw Adaizi's face crumble, saw her do the math instantly. Months of work, maybe a year, and by then it would be too late. "However," Dr. Okonkwo continued, "you've been selected for our charitable care program. Full treatment, no cost." Adaizi stared at him. "Why? Why me? The selection process is confidential, but your situation qualified. Will you allow us to help your son?" What followed was perhaps the most painful thing Obina had ever witnessed, a mother's pride warring with her child's survival. Adaize looked at Chibuzo, at his grey skin and laboured breathing, at the life slipping away despite all her efforts. Then back at the doctor. "This is real?" she asked. This isn't some kind of trick? Think about it. If someone offered you everything you needed but couldn't explain why, would you trust it? Would you risk your pride for survival? Tell me in the comments what you would do, because Adaizi's choice is about to change her life in ways she can't imagine. "It's real," Dr. Okonkwo assured her. "I stake my reputation on it." Finally, Adaizi nodded. "Then yes, save my son." Within 2 hours, Chibuzo was in St. Nicholas Hospital's pediatric ICU, one of Lagos's best facilities. Adaizi refused to leave his side, sitting in a chair next to his bed, holding his small hand, watching. Machines breathed for him. Obinna arrived that evening using the service entrance. He'd changed from his expensive suit to something more modest, though he couldn't completely hide what he was. Power clung to some people like cologne. He found Adaizi in the ICU waiting room during one of the mandatory family breaks, where medical staff insisted parents rest. She sat alone, staring at nothing, her face exhausted beyond measure. "Adaizi," she looked up, and recognition sparked immediately. "Mr. Okafor." Confusion flooded her features. "What are you doing here? May I sit?" She nodded, too tired to question it properly. Obinna sat, leaving respectful distance between them. "I heard about your son," he said carefully. "I have contacts at this hospital. They mentioned the charitable case." Adaizi's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's convenient. Lagos is smaller than people think, especially in certain circles. Your circles don't usually include people like me. Perhaps they should." Obinna met her gaze. "How is he?" They say he'll survive, that he'll get better." Tears spilled down Adaizi's cheeks. I thought I was going to watch him die. I thought all my work, all those nights, would still not be enough." "You work very hard." "Not hard enough, apparently. I needed charity to save my own child." The bitterness in her voice was sharp. "Sometimes accepting help is its own kind of strength." Adaizi laughed without humor. "Easy to say when you've never needed it." Obinna was silent for a moment. Then, "I grew up in Ajagunle. Not the same streets as you, but close enough. I remember what it's like to be powerless, to watch people you love suffer while you can do nothing." She looked at him with new eyes, seeing past the expensive clothes to something underneath. "Is that why you became what you are?" "What am I?" "You know what you are, Mr. Okafor. Everyone knows. The question is why you're here, in this hospital, talking to your cleaner about her sick child." Smart. Obinna had known she was intelligent, but he was beginning to realize how much she'd hidden behind silence and lowered eyes. "Maybe I'm tired of being what everyone expects," he said quietly. "Maybe you're scheming something. Maybe both things are true." Adaizi studied him for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Everyone wants something. Then consider this an investment in good karma." Obinna stood. "Your son needs you healthy. There's a cafeteria on the second floor. Go eat something. The hospital food isn't great, but it's better than nothing. I can't afford. It's covered under the charitable program. Everything is covered." He started to walk away, then paused. "Adaizi, take tomorrow night off, and the next. However long you need. Your job will be waiting." "Why are you being kind to me?" Her voice cracked on the question. Obinna looked back at her, this thin, exhausted woman who'd been fighting impossible battles in silence, because someone should be. After he left, Obinna sat in his car for a long time, not starting the engine. Emeka called twice. He ignored it. His empire ran on fear and respect, on calculated moves and strategic thinking. But what he felt, sitting in that hospital parking lot, wasn't strategic. It was guilt. Guilt that he lived in a penthouse, while Chibuzo nearly died on a thin mattress. Guilt that he spent more on a single suit than Adaizi made in months. Guilt that his empire was built on the same poverty that trapped people like her. But guilt, Obinna knew, was useless without action, and he was a man of action. He pulled out his phone and made a series of calls. By morning, several things would happen. A trust fund would be established in Chibuzo's name, enough to cover education through university and medical care for life, dispersed slowly through charitable foundation payments to avoid suspicion. Adaizi's salary would triple, effective immediately, explained as a performance bonus, and expanded duties. Most importantly, Obinna would do something he'd never done in 20 years of ruling Lagos's underworld. He would let himself care about someone who had nothing to offer him in return. It was, he realized, the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. 3 weeks passed. Chibuzo recovered with the resilience of children, his grey skin returning to healthy brown, his lungs clearing, his laughter filling the hospital room. Adaeze remained by his side, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, eating the cafeteria food that Obinna had arranged to be complimentary, slowly believing that maybe, sometimes, good things happened to people like her. Obinna visited more than he should have, always with excuses, checking on hospital operations, meeting with Dr. Okonkwo about other charitable cases, happening to be in the neighborhood. Nobody believed the excuses, least of all Adaeze. "You're a terrible liar for someone in your profession," she told him during one visit. They were in the hospital garden, a small patch of green that the facility maintained for patients and families. Chibuzo was sleeping after his afternoon medication. Adaeze had finally agreed to step outside for fresh air. "What profession is that?" Obinna asked. "The one where everyone's afraid of you." "Are you afraid of me?" Adaeze considered this carefully. "I was. When I first started working for you, I was terrified. Every time you spoke to me, I thought I'd done something wrong that you'd fire me or worse. And now I'm confused." She looked at him directly. "You're not what I expected. You're complicated. Is that good or bad?" "I haven't decided yet." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The Lagos afternoon pressed down, hot and humid. Around them the city hummed, traffic, voices, life in endless motion. "Why did you follow me?" Adaeze asked suddenly. "That night. I know it was you. I saw you in Ajagunle." Obinna had known she'd figured it out, but hearing her say it still struck him. "You saw me. I see everything, Mr. Okafor. It's how people like me survive, by noticing things others miss." She turned to face him fully. "So I'm asking again, why?" He could have lied, should have lied, but something about Adaeze made lies feel impossible. "Curiosity at first. You were different from everyone else around me. You didn't want anything. You weren't impressed or frightened or greedy. You were just yourself." "And after?" "You saw?" "After I saw—" Obinna struggled for words. "I realized how small my world had become, how every relationship, every interaction was transactional. You were the first real thing I'd encountered in years." "I'm not a thing. I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Adaze's expression softened slightly. "But you need to understand something. I'm grateful for what you've done. Chibuzo is alive because of you. But gratitude isn't the same as whatever you think this is." "What do you think this is?" "Here's what I want you to consider. Can two people from completely different worlds truly understand each other? Can wealth and poverty coexist without one consuming the other? Share your thoughts below, because what happens next will test that question. A powerful man's fascination with something he doesn't understand," Adaeze said carefully. "You see me as different, authentic, real. But Mr. Okafor, I'm just a woman trying to survive. The poverty you find interesting? I find it suffocating. The struggles you think make me strong? They're killing me slowly." Her honesty hit like a physical blow. "I didn't mean to romanticize your suffering." "Didn't you? You grew up in Ajagunle, you said. But you left. You built your empire and never looked back. Now you visit slums like they're zoos, watching how the poor people live, feeling moved by their resilience." She wasn't angry, just tired. "We're not resilient, Mr. Okafor. We just don't have the luxury of falling apart." Obinna sat with that truth. "You're right, I apologize." "I don't want apologies, I want—" She stopped, seeming to surprise herself. "I don't know what I want." "Tell me about Chibuzo's father," Obinna said gently. Adaze's face closed immediately. "He's not part of our lives. But he was once. Once. A long time ago." She was quiet for a moment, then, "His name was Chidi. He was funny, charming, full of big dreams. We were going to leave Ajagunle together, build something better. Then I got pregnant, and suddenly all those dreams meant him leaving alone. He gave me money for an abortion and disappeared. I'm sorry. I'm not. Chibuzo is the best thing in my life, the only purely good thing." Adaeze looked toward the hospital building where her son slept. "Everything I do is for him. Every floor I scrub, every night I work, every moment I'm too tired to breathe. It's all for him." "What about what you want?" Obinna asked. "What I want doesn't matter." "It should." Easy to say when wanting and having aren't separated by impossible distance. Adaeze stood. "I should get back. Thank you for the conversation, Mr. Okafor. Obinna. My name is Obinna. She looked at him for a long moment. I know who you are, Mr. Okafor, everyone does, and that's why this, whatever this is, can't be anything more than what it is. After she left, Obinna remained in the garden. For a man who'd built his empire on reading people, on anticipating their moves and exploiting their weaknesses, Adeze was completely opaque. She wasn't playing hard to get. She genuinely saw the chasm between their worlds and refused to pretend it didn't exist. That night, Obinna did something he hadn't done in years. He drove through Ajagunle, not in pursuit of anything, just looking, really looking. He saw the children playing in sewage water because there was nowhere else to play, saw the young men standing idle because there were no jobs, saw the women carrying water because the taps didn't work, saw the whole impossible grind of poverty that never stopped, never relented, just crushed people slowly. This was the world Adeze navigated every day. This was what she fought against with every scrubbed floor, every missed meal, every exhausted night. And he occasionally drove through in expensive cars, feeling momentarily uncomfortable before returning to his penthouse. Emika called. "Boss, we have a situation with the Eastern boys. They're pushing into our territory again." "Handle it," Obinna said automatically. "They're asking for you specifically. They say—" "I said handle it, Emeka." Silence on the line. Then, "Boss, you've been distracted lately. The men are noticing. People are starting to think you're getting soft." "Let them think what they want. That's dangerous thinking in our business. Maybe I'm tired of our business." "You don't mean that." But the truth was, Obinna wasn't sure what he meant anymore. A month ago, his world made sense. Power, territory, respect. These were the currencies that mattered. Now, after watching a woman sacrifice everything for her son, after seeing real courage in a hospital room instead of a boardroom, he wasn't sure of anything. When he returned to his penthouse that night, it felt emptier than usual. The marble floors that Adeze cleaned gleamed in the moonlight. The expensive furniture, the art, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing his kingdom, it all felt hollow. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for everything, but please understand, I can't be your project. I can't be the thing that makes you feel better about your choices. I have to focus on my son. I hope you understand." Obinna read the message 3 times. She was right, of course. She was always right. But knowing she was right didn't stop the unexpected ache in his chest. He'd faced down rival gang leaders, corrupt politicians, even military generals. But a 30-something cleaner from Ajagunle had done what none of them could. She'd made him question everything, and he had no idea what to do about it. Chibuzo was discharged on a Wednesday morning, healthy and energetic, clutching a new toy truck that the nurses had given him. Adeze signed the discharge papers with shaking hands, still half expecting someone to tell her there was a bill, a catch, something that would snatch away this miracle. But there was nothing. Just Dr. Okonkwo's genuine smile and instructions for follow-up care, all covered, all arranged, all impossibly generous. "The foundation wants to check on Chibuzo monthly," Dr. Okonkwo explained. "Make sure the recovery continues properly. Is that acceptable?" "Of course. Yes. Thank you." Adeze felt tears threatening again. "Thank you so much." Obinna had arranged for a car to take them home. Not one of his obvious vehicles, just a clean, reliable taxi with a driver who'd been thoroughly vetted and paid extremely well to be respectful and discreet. Adeze accepted the ride without argument. She was learning to take help when it was offered, even if pride still whispered objections. The drive through Lagos gave her time to think. Chibuzo sat beside her, pointing out windows at buildings and cars, his excitement boundless. He had no idea how close he'd come to not seeing any of this again. "Mama, can we get suya?" he asked as they passed a street vendor. "Maybe next week, when you're stronger." "The doctor said I'm strong now." "Stronger, not strongest yet." She kissed his forehead. "We have to follow instructions." When they pulled up to their building in Ajagunle, reality crashed back. The crumbling stairs, the smell of decay, the narrow apartment with its thin walls and broken windows. Chibuzo didn't care. It was home. But Adeze saw it differently now after weeks in the hospital's clean corridors and comfortable rooms. She saw it as Obinna must have seen it that night he followed her. She saw the poverty she'd become numb to, the impossibility of ever escaping. It on her cleaner's salary, no matter how many nights she worked. The salary that had somehow tripled, she remembered. The performance bonus that had appeared in her account with paperwork claiming expanded duties. She wasn't stupid. She knew where it came from, but she'd accepted it anyway, for Chibuzo, always for Chibuzo. That evening, after settling her son in bed with his new toy and a proper meal, chicken and rice instead of just gari, Adaeze allowed herself to think about Obina. It would be easy to hate him for making her life more complicated, easy to resent his money, his power, his ability to solve problems with a phone call that she'd been breaking herself trying to fix, easy to dismiss him as a criminal, a man who'd built his empire on other people's suffering, but it would also be dishonest, because the truth was more complicated. Obina had seen her desperation and responded not with pity, but with action. He'd followed her not to exploit, but to understand. He'd helped, not for gratitude or leverage, but because he'd seen someone fighting an impossible battle and decided to even the odds. And maybe, just maybe, he'd done it because he saw something in her that he recognized in himself, the determination to survive, the refusal to break, the will to keep fighting even when everything seemed lost. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Adaeze, it's Obina." Her heart did something complicated. "Mr. Okafor, is Chibuzo home safely?" "Yes, he's sleeping, happy and healthy." "Good, that's good." He sounded uncertain, which was strange for a man known for absolute confidence. "I wanted to check, and to say, you don't have to come back to work. The salary will continue regardless. Consider it part of Chibuzo's care package." No, I'm coming back to work. Tomorrow night, as usual." Adaeze was surprised by her own certainty. "I'm not taking money for nothing. That's charity, and I've had enough charity to last a lifetime." "It's not charity, it's... What is it, Mr. Okafor, Obina?" She used his first name deliberately, testing how it felt. "What is this really about?" Silence on the line. Then, "I don't know, but I'd like to find out, if you'll let me." "What would you do? When someone from a completely different world offers you not just help, but connection, do you risk it?" "The final question isn't mine to answer. It's yours. But before you go, there's another story waiting. One that'll make you question everything about love, power, and the choices we make when our backs are against the wall. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Click the video on your screen and let's continue this journey together." "I don't date gangsters," Adaeze said, but there was something almost playful in her tone. "I don't date my employees," Obina countered. "Then it's a good thing I quit." She surprised herself with the words, but once said, they felt right. Effective immediately. "I can't work for you and whatever this is. It's too complicated. I don't want you to quit. I don't want to be in debt to you, not financially, not emotionally." Adaeze took a breath. "If we're going to figure out what this is, we do it as equals, or we don't do it at all." "Equals," Obina tested the word. "In case you haven't noticed, we're not exactly equal. No, we're not. You have money and power. I have nothing." She paused. "Except the ability to walk away. That makes us equal enough." Another long silence. Then Obina laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You're terrifying, you know that? So are you. Maybe that's why this might actually work." "Might? I'm not making promises. I'm barely making sense of any of this." Adaeze looked at Chibuzo sleeping peacefully. "But I'm willing to try if you are." "I am." "Then here are my conditions. First, no more secret arrangements. No surprise bank deposits. No mysterious payments. If you want to help, ask first. Second, you don't pull me into your business. Whatever you do in your empire, I'm not part of it. Third, you meet Chibuzo properly. Not as a benefactor, but as someone in my life. If you can't do that, this stops now. I can do that. And fourth, be honest with me. About everything. Your world, your choices, your past. I won't judge, but I won't accept lies either. Deal. On one condition of my own." "What's that?" "You let me take you to dinner. Somewhere nice. Just us." He paused. "Not as employer and employee. Not as benefactor and recipient. Just as Obina and Adaeze." She smiled despite herself. "That sounds as nice. Friday? I'll pick you up. I'll meet you somewhere. I'm not giving you my address. You already know where I live anyway." "Fair enough." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Adaeze? Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing past what I am to who I might be." After they hung up, Adaeze sat in her small apartment, processing what had just happened. She'd quit her job, agreed to date a notorious gangster, invited him into her life and her son's life. By any reasonable measure, she'd lost her mind. But for the first time in years, she felt something other than exhaustion and fear. She felt possibility. Across the city, in his penthouse, Obinna stood at the window looking out at Lagos. His empire still existed. His reputation still preceded him. His power still shaped the city's underworld. None of that had changed, but everything else had. He thought about Adaeze's conditions, her refusal to be rescued or saved, her insistence on equality despite the obvious disparity in their circumstances. She was right to be cautious, right to set boundaries, right to question his motives. She was right about everything, and that, he realized, was exactly what he needed. Someone who would question him, challenge him, refuse to be impressed by the things that impressed everyone else. Someone who saw Obinna, the man, not Obinna Okafor, the crime lord. His phone buzzed. Emeka. Boss, the Eastern boys. Situation is handled, but there's talk about you and the cleaner. The men are confused. Let them be confused. Boss, my personal life is not open for discussion. Make that clear to everyone. You're making yourself vulnerable, giving enemies leverage. Obinna looked out at the city lights. Maybe vulnerability is exactly what I need. That's not how our world works. Then maybe it's time to work differently. After ending the call, Obinna made one more decision. He pulled out a secure phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. Commissioner, he said when the call connected, I want to discuss a deal. Immunity for cooperation. I have information on every major operation in Lagos. Names, locations, evidence, everything. In exchange, I want out. Clean slate. Protection for my assets. And protection for someone important to me. The police commissioner was silent for a long moment. Then, you're serious. Completely. What changed? Obinna thought about Adaeze scrubbing, blood from marble floors, about Chibuzo fighting for breath on a thin mattress, about a woman who'd rebuilt his understanding of strength and courage without even trying. I met someone who made me want to be better than what I am. That's either very stupid or very brave. Probably both. They talked details, timelines, evidence, witness protection protocols. It would take months, maybe years, to fully extract himself from the empire he'd built. But for the first time since he'd climbed out of Hajgunle, Obinna saw a path that didn't end in violence or prison or early death. He saw a future, and in that future, if he was very lucky and worked very hard, maybe there was room for a woman who cleaned floors and loved her son and refused to be anything less than exactly who she was. Maybe there was room for happiness. On Friday, Obinna waited at a modest restaurant in Lekki, nice but not ostentatious, the kind of place where people actually ate instead of being seen. He wore simple clothes, no jewelry, trying to be just a man on a date instead of a legend wearing human skin. When Adaeze arrived, she took his breath away. She wore a simple dress, nothing expensive, probably borrowed, but she carried herself with such quiet dignity that every expensive piece of clothing in Lagos couldn't match it. Her hair was natural, her makeup minimal, her smile cautious but real. You came, Obinna said, standing. I said I would. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. I keep my promises. She sat down, accepting the chair he pulled out, even the scary ones. Is this scary? Terrifying. But she was smiling. You? More scared than I've been in 20 years. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. They ordered food, jollof rice and plantain, simple and perfect. The conversation flowed easier than either expected, moving from Chibuzo's recovery to Adaeze's childhood in Enugu to Obinna's carefully edited version of his rise from poverty. Tell me the real story, Adaeze said eventually. Not the sanitized version. I need to know what I'm walking into. So Obinna told her. Not everything. Some things were too dark to share over dinner, but enough. The violence, the compromises, the slow erosion of the person he'd meant to be. He told her about the empire built on fear, the respect earned through blood, the hollowness of having everything and nothing simultaneously. And now? She asked when he finished. Now I'm trying to figure out how to build something different, something better. Can you really walk away from all that? I'm going to try. For you, for Chibuzo, for myself. He reached across the table, stopping just short of her hand. But I need you to understand. It won't be easy. There will be danger. People who see you as leverage or weakness. It might get very bad before it gets better. I've survived very bad before. Not this kind of bad. Adaeze finally placed her hand in his. Then, we'll survive it together, or we won't. But, either way, we face it honestly. Deal. They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked along Bar Beach, listening to waves crash against the shore. Lagos spread out around them, endless, chaotic, beautiful and terrible, and full of impossible stories just like theirs. "What happens now?" Adaeze asked as they stood watching the ocean. "Now we take it one day at a time," Obina said. "I work on extracting myself from my empire. You focus on Chibuzo. We figure out this thing between us. We hope the enemies I've made don't find you before I can protect you properly." "That's not very romantic." "I'm new at romance. I'm better at tactical planning and threat assessment." She laughed, the first fully relaxed laugh he'd heard from her. "We're quite a pair, a reformed gangster and an exhausted single mother. What could possibly go wrong?" "Everything. Absolutely everything." "Well then," Addis leaned against him slightly, testing the comfort of his presence. "I guess we'd better hold on tight." And there on a Lagos beach at midnight, with the city humming behind them and the ocean stretching dark before them, Obinna Okafor made a promise he intended to keep. He would be better. He would be worthy of this second chance. He would protect this woman and her son with everything he had, even if it cost him the empire he'd spent 20 years building. Because some things he'd finally learned were worth more than power. Some things were worth everything.